Hello, my name is Derek Elin, and this is my creating project presentation for Central Michigan University Innovative Uses of Technology. Since I am an art teacher, and specifically a digital arts teacher, I wanted to create an innovation that had to do with that class. And mine kind of centered around a tool and a program that I'm not used to using, but it's a program that's actually really relevant to the commercial art world. That program is called Adobe Illustrator. It looks like this. The other program that I have up is Adobe Photoshop. And Photoshop is more common, as daunting as it can be. It tends to be a little easier to use because not only is it related to photo manipulation, but it also can be used as a drawing program. The thing about drawing in Photoshop is it kind of works the way people expect it to for the most part, although there are some other options. I can draw a picture with the mouse that isn't very good. Or I could draw a picture, and I'm using this pressure-sensitive pen tablet set. So if I want to get a little fancier, I have pressure sensitivity, so that means I can shade and get different thicknesses of line and kind of develop my drawing and so on and so forth. So that's one way of drawing, and Illustrator represents a totally different way. And as one might imagine, normally you're not going to get great results with this situation. And even this situation, I'm not going to sit here and do it, but I could take the time to make this look really good. I could shade it and let the shading build up, and that's going to be great for a student who is all about drawing. Finally we get to do this thing that fits my comfort level and my skill level and so on and so forth. But as one might imagine, not everyone works that way. Not everyone is comfortable drawing this way. And even this crummy little drawing of a kitten that I did in 20 seconds, there's a lot of students who just don't jive with that. So my idea was to learn Illustrator, which represents a wildly different way of drawing. And specifically, it is Illustrator's chief tool, the pen tool, that I was interested in learning. So typically I just give my kids a real quick tutorial on the pen tool and have them create some random shapes as part of an exercise. The pen tool might sound like any other drawing tool. You can draw with a regular old pen in real life, and it works just like the kittens I just drew. However, the pen tool is actually about plotting points, so I'm going to go ahead and use it here. You plot a point, and then you plot another point, and I'm going to click and hold, and that allows you to either create a straight line, or if you click and hold and pull, you can create a curved line, something like that. And then you have lots of options, and I'll just kind of create a random shape. You have lots of options, and when you're creating a random shape, it's pretty easy. I can even, I can pull and then tell it, no, I don't want that to be curved, or I can go back here and hold the Alt key and turn this if I want it to angle in a different way, if I'm trying to do something specific. So as one might imagine, it's very easy to make random shapes. It's a lot more difficult to do what I did down here, which is the first part of my creating project was to create a digital signature. So if I get in here, I have to get pretty close, and you can start to see, especially if I click on this, you can see that this signature, it's in two parts because I don't connect my D to my E. But the signature was generated with the pen tool, which means I had to get it to actually do something specific. However, that specific thing was a simple line. So that's why of my two related projects, I decided that a digital signature would not only be relevant to students because, you can slap it on something and say that you signed your artwork, but also would be a great way to learn the pen tool and to get into how it works. It does, of course, have to be combined with Edit, Undo, or Control-Z, because a lot of the time, even the pen tool doesn't work as intuitively, although I'm getting better at it. It's definitely not intuitive at first. So the way this lesson works As complex as the pen tool is, it's pretty simple. What I did first was I basically just like scanned or photographed a picture of my signature. And you can kind of see the bottom of this piece of paper. I signed my name several times until I got one that I felt like was sort of an ideal version of my signature. And once I had that, I created a new file in Illustrator, which I'm not going to go through that. I will show a video of me working in a bit. I created a new file, and I imported my signature into it after kind of lightening it in Photoshop. So in other words, I brought it in like this. And in fact, if I just send this to the back, you can blatantly see, once I get it lined up, how it matches up pretty perfectly. So once it was in here, I started using the pen tool over top of it, got in there, and got the lines to trace around as accurately as possible. So that was essentially lesson 1. And again, the focus of it is learning the pen tool. I do have, the lesson is meant to conclude with like a practical application of it, which is why I took this cheesy photo of myself and I actually made my digital signature into a watermark. So if I go back to here and delete this off, one nice thing about Adobe Creative Suite is there are a bunch of programs that do different things, but they're kind of meant to talk to one another. So if I put this here and grab some of this, or maybe even, here, I'll undo that move, and I'll just kind of group the whole thing. Group. And then I can drag this whole thing into here, and it might take it a second, or two, or there you go. So it'll pop in here, I can grow it, I can do more to it, and what I ended up doing, which this next part I'm not even including as a major part of the lesson, because by the time we get to Illustrator in my classes, getting this to be transparent and having a drop shadow so that it kind of functions the way a watermark on a photograph typically does is like second nature to my students. It's stuff we've gone over long before. So the idea being, this might quell some fears students might have about posting their artwork and then it being stolen or misused or something like that. Now, ultimately, the ulterior motive is to empower students with the pen tool to be able to create illustrations. In other words, if I go back to here in my little kitties, if I wanted this to be generated with perfect lines, and even some students who are talented with drawing are going to just have these perfectionist tendencies that get in the way of letting a line maybe be a little bit scratchy or have like a little bit of a wiggle or a wobble to it. And if I get in here, you might sort of see that happening. So essentially you could get, a very similar effect with the pen tool in Illustrator, which is why the second lesson, which involves creating clip art, and here's an example of clip art. In fact, if I just run a Google search of clip art, you probably know what I'm talking about as soon as you see this. If you don't use them, other teachers, throughout your educational history have probably used them. Quick, cartoony, simple images that are meant to just be sort of thrown into a presentation or a handout to jazz it up, give it some visual flair. So the fact is, with the sort of perfect shapes that are common to clip art, there is sort of like a cartoon sort of style that clip art commonly has. You might imagine that the pen tool is kind of perfect for that thing, and that in fact this method of drawing, which is maybe more illustrative and might seem more painterly or artistic, maybe just doesn't work as well for clip art that is recognizable and simple, quick at a glance. So my idea was to have students create and contribute to a clip art database. So one of our cohort suggested a website called openclipart.org, which unfortunately is down for maintenance. And he actually noticed that. Thank you, Dennis. He noticed that and suggested clker.com, which for whatever reason on my school's computer I can't get to work. I can join, I can log in, and it still won't let me upload. It keeps taking me back to log in, and then I log in and it doesn't let me upload. So open Clipart, even though I can't show it to you, it is ideal for my needs, because what I want is I want students to be able to create Clipart for their teachers. The project would begin with students interviewing their teachers, just something brief, asking about, is there a handout or is there an upcoming thing that you're going to be teaching about? And they're trying to get at the root of the idea of like something that a subject within their subject that is maybe too obscure or too new for Clipart to exist. And ultimately, they create the Clipart. They treat the teacher as their client, which is meant to be kind of lighthearted, but also kind of meant to mimic the sort of like a business relationship between a commercial artist and his or her client. So they would take a work in progress to the teacher and say, how does this look? And then eventually they would upload it to this website. And a nice thing about this website is it lets you add searchable tags. So even though we'd be uploading it for the whole world, we would tag it with like the name of our school or the teacher's name, so that they can easily find it, or future teachers of that subject could find it. So, for mine, I actually created two. We'll look at this one in a little bit when I actually show the process. I actually did clip art of Robert Mueller. And the idea here was that he's an important figure in current events. You hear his name all the time. And that I kind of figured a current events class would often be devoid of clip art. Now, typically, they probably use images from news articles. But as we've learned in this program, that's, not always necessarily a great thing to do. So part of the point of clip art is that it's meant to be free, Creative Commons, distribute and use and do whatever with it. I created this picture of Robert Mueller, and my wiki kind of goes through the process. So we'll just take a look at that real quick. Basically, you use the pen tool to create shapes, and specific shapes. And then you can control things like fills and strokes and gradients. A fill is where you just fill it with one color. A stroke is the outline. And there are some circumstances, and maybe easier to see on the full one if I kind of zoom it. There are some circumstances where I'm using a thicker line, like here, versus a thinner line right here. So I was aware of that and controlling it throughout the creation of it. In these images you see I do have photographic reference, and that is one part of the lesson is students would be required to use some sort of photographic reference, even if they are heavily stylizing it or simply using it to refer to. If they had to do a unicorn, there aren't any actual photographs of unicorns, but a horse would do, and they add the horn. It ends up you control the strokes, which again is the outline, the fills, and then any gradients that you want to do. You'll notice that I even added some shapes to mine that were meant to kind of show like the shading of the planes of the face and things like that, that didn't even have a stroke on them, that just kind of worked better syncing in a little more with it. I didn't want to make it look like he had clown makeup on or something. The illustration gets, once again, posted. The teacher gets informed. And then, as far as evaluation, I just kind of imagined that that they would do some self-evaluation and that they would be rated in terms of stylization and kind of working with the pen tool versus recognizability. Can I tell that this is Robert Mueller? Now, I'll be honest, and sometimes I am my harshest critic, this looks a little friendly for Robert Mueller to me. Even if I compare it to, I'm not saying he's unfriendly, but he's a pretty serious-looking guy, especially in this photo. This kind of looks like he's whimsical and fun. So that might be something that I would tweak, or that I would even advise the student to tweak. But for an example, it definitely works. The only other part of the evaluation would be like the basic parameters. I had written that they would have at least 20 shapes. There's a lot more than 20 here, 20 isn't a huge number. But if they had something that was a little simpler, and that is one thing that is kind of important to me with most lessons, is that I have some range within which students can work. That, combined with my awareness of their skill levels, ensures that I'm not letting anyone who is capable of better do something too simple. But I want to be able to accommodate people who are able to work at this level and people who maybe are going to learn just as much creating something a little simpler. So that's why I had written in my description about sort of a scale that can be described where something like a symbol that would be a little bit simpler might be for like a student with a cognitive impairment or something. Whereas something like an inanimate object like these things might be sort of beginner level. And then like a beginner to medium, we could say. Animal might be medium level, and then people might be high challenge level. So that's pretty much it. I do want to take just about 1 minute to show the process. So I'll narrate this. I did create and then speed up this video of me actually making the exotic fruit thing, and kind of the only reason I made it is just because, the Robert Mueller one took me a few days. This one took me like a half hour, and, because I learned how to use the stuff. So here I am creating shapes that are all kind of contributed to and layered over top of one another to create the star fruit. Here I'm adding a gradient, and I'm basically making, this one's a horned melon. If you're not familiar with it, you can see, again, the reference image. So here I'm creating the little horns, the spikes, and I'm kind of copying them, resizing them, rotating them, and throwing them all over the place. So there's really only about 3 different ones that get flipped and transformed. Here I'm creating the kumquat, shading it. I was kind of imagining there being a color scheme here, where, you've got like oranges, reds, and greens all kind of coming together. And then at the very end, I do add type. I skipped over that with the digital signature, but I did end up adding the word photography using a type tool. Again, that's kind of like baby stuff for my students. So there it goes, and again, each of those shapes, other than the type, was created using the pen tool, and again, created plotting points. So in closing, it is ultimately, more than anything, meant to kind of satisfy students who maybe don't operate this way so effectively. So the idea is that I might start an illustration unit in general with some exercises, and one of them might be, using this pen tablet set and, doing, more of a painterly way of creating an illustration. And then another exercise might be, being that I would imagine it only taking, maybe 4 days. Another exercise might be creating this piece of clip art. So the ultimate end project could involve a choice between the two. Which one speaks to you more, or which one do you feel most capable, or most engaging or interesting or challenging, but kind of letting students choose which mode of creating imagery they want to create some sort of independent illustration project. So that's it for me. Thanks for listening.